From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hello. I like a response. A big welcome to the National Book Festival. My name is Mary Quattlebaum, and I review middle grade and teen fiction for the Washington Post. And the Post has been a charter sponsor of this fine festival since it began 16 years ago. I'm going to ask you to join me in thanking a few folks before we introduce our wonderful author. First, the Library of Congress, who has been the festival's host since the beginning. A big thank you to festival co-chair David Rubenstein and other festival sponsors. We've got to give a big round of applause to our volunteers, and we know them this year by their blue shirts. They come back year after year, and the festival couldn't happen without them. So thank you. And on behalf of the festival, I want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience of book lovers. You know, you guys, we got to thank you for caring deeply about books and their creators, for sharing books with friends, kids, students, and even random strangers. There's also a chance to donate, you know, if you really want to show your love, and this will help to keep the festival going and growing. You can check your program for details. Also, just to let you know, there's going to be a chance to ask questions after the talk. And also just to let you know, there are mics at either side of the room, and if you ask a question, you will be filmed for the library's archives. So our author, I am thrilled, capital T, thrilled to introduce Meg Medina today. Through her books and in the work she does for the community, Meg is a powerful, insightful, compassionate voice for young people, especially for girls. Meg spoke movingly 2 years ago at the National Book Festival about her acclaimed novel, Yaqui Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass. And I was here with my husband and my teenage daughter. There wasn't a dry eye in the house, and there were a lot of eyes, so there were a lot of tears and a lot of connection with Meg. Meg writes across a range of ages, from picture books to novels for young adults. The Review Journal book list calls her writing heartfelt and truthful. Her first book, the picture book, Tía Isa Wants a Car, won the Ezra Jack Keats New Writer's Medal, and the awards just keep coming. Her latest novel, Burn, Baby Burn, was recently included on the long list for the National Book Award. That is a huge honor for an important, sensitive work of historical fiction. And I also have to tell you, you know, we all know Meg's book and the disco ball that's on the cover. I saw Meg at the gala last night, and she was rocking some enormous, shiny disco ball earrings, which unfortunately she did not wear today. When she isn't writing, Meg is busy with community projects that support girls, Latino youth, and literacy. These projects all speak deeply to her Cuban-American roots. So please join me in welcoming the amazing Meg Medina.
Hi everybody, hola, ¿qué tal? I'm so excited to be here again at the National Book Festival, and yes, it's true that I was wearing disco ball earrings last night and rocking them at the Library of Congress. So it was all in honor, of course, of Burn Baby Burn. So how long does it take to write a book? And that's a question that I get asked all the time. It's usually asked to me by a writer who's like dog tired of the project they're working on. They're sick of it. Or sometimes it's asked by a kid who's trying to do the math, like, how long do I want to put in to, write this book that somebody's going to read in an hour or a day? So how long did it take me to write Burn Baby Burn? And I'm going to tell you that it took me 40 years. And that's because sometimes, long before a book is made up of words, it's made up of emotions and scraps of memories that keep tangling in your feet. So Burn Baby Burn is set in Queens in 1977, and it follows the tumultuous life of Nora Lopez, who's 18 that awful year, and she's trying to figure out what comes out next in her life besides getting away from her crazy family. But here's the thing, it was historical fiction, which is a sobering fact to accept, not only because 1977 kind of feels too close to be called history, but mostly because I'm not a historian. And so I was thinking, what business do I have taking on a historical fiction? But regardless of what I was thinking about consciously, regardless of what I was telling myself that I could or couldn't do as a writer, the story of that girl, of that family, of that horrible, horrible year in New York's history was already in the works. Here are the facts. I was a brand new teenager in 1977. I lived in Flushing with my mother and my sister. My mother was a Cuban immigrant who didn't speak English well, who was a divorced mom, raising 2 teenage girls at the height of disco and drugs. She lived in a city that was on the brink of economic and social collapse. My mother lived a lot of her life in a cloud of anxiety. When I think of her today, I always think of her saying, "Cuidado, be careful." My sister, 5 years older, was an art student at the High School of Art and Design. She was also a budding radical feminist, a loner, an intellectual, a girl wrestling with her own identity and with her rage. Together, we were girls that my poor mother didn't understand. We were girls trying to figure out who we were at a time when women all around us were demanding new opportunities, a voice, a new way of being thought of. So this is how a book begins. It doesn't start with me saying, I think I'll write a historical fiction about New York City. Instead, it starts with memories. The big portable record player that opened like a suitcase, left behind by my father when he left us. The way I dropped the needle on the LP and listened to Donna Summer groaning, "Love to love you, baby." And my mother saying, "¿Qué dice esa mujer? What's that woman saying?" My sister shrieking with laughter because I didn't know, not really, I just danced. A memory of Ms. Magazine and my sister and I poring over the no comment section, which consisted of examples of sexist ads all around us. How I stared one day for such a long time at an ad for bowling lanes that said, "Beat your wife tonight." A memory of working so hard to get that stupid Farrah Fawcett hair flip. And my very cool marshmallow wedge shoes. A memory of the loud arguments that erupted in our apartment and made me ashamed. The smell of urine in the subway, the pop of the Spalding pink balls against the schoolyard walls, the cat calls, "Oye, mami!" Kids hanging outside the building on the dirty hoods of cars in the summer. And of course, there was the fear. What if Ma lost her job? What was up with all those fires being set in the Bronx? And what about Son of Sam? So 2016 marks the 40th anniversary, the beginning of David Berkowitz's reign of terror in New York as Son of Sam, a killer with a .44 caliber revolver and a thirst for young women with brown hair. He began shooting girls that summer, 2 young girls back from a night out who were sitting in a parked car talking. It wouldn't be until March that the police confessed, finally, that we had a serial killer on our hands, but by then he had been writing letters to the city and to police by mailing them to the Daily News, which published them in part. They were chilling and poetic, rambling notes about where he'd go next. "I'll be back," he always wrote, and he made good on that promise. In all, he would murder 6 and injure 7 more. Many of those murders unfolded in my neighborhood and in my borough. The police task force was headquartered at the 109th Precinct on Main Street, in Main Street's shopping district, where I walked every day. One of his early shootings was outside a bar on Depot Road, a few blocks from where I lived, and of course there were the shootings at other nearby Queens places like Forest Hills and Bayside, only a few bus stops away. So what I remember is hanging on a parked car with a girl named Jenny Lee talking about who we thought the killer was. He could be that guy at the deli, or how about that weirdo on the bus, maybe even our super. That July, when New York finally had a blackout during an epic heat wave, I was home alone and Son of Sam was still on the loose. My mother and sister had gone to get cigarettes, and my first thought was, oh no, he's here to get me. Memories that won't leave you, that tangle in your feet. And so finally, I had the sense to decide to wrestle all that disco music, all that fear, all that chaos into the story of a girl. Researching a book like this is hard and exciting, especially when you're a newbie. I worked right here in DC at the Library of Congress, rediscovering the questionable joys of microfiche as I reread issues of Ms. Magazine and the Daily News and the New York Times articles about all the city's troubles. I tried to read everything in order so that I could scare myself all over again, and it worked. I had the chance to interview also women who considered themselves disco queens about their favorite outfits, their favorite dance partners, the DJs they loved. I interviewed a former police officer who investigated Son of Sam, who confessed that they had known far earlier than they let on what the trouble really was. I interviewed my friend John, who pumped gas in Queens that summer, and he recalls the tow truck that brought in a bullet-riddled Cadillac, dusty with white fingerprint dust, fresh from the scene of the Eliphas shooting. Research about the blackout was the most revealing, actually, for me. People who were trapped in the World Trade Center restaurant, for instance, were treated to champagne that night as they looked at the moonscape below. If you lived in an upscale suburban neighborhood, you spent the night on your stoop having a cookout with your neighbors with all that food that was spoiling in your mother's refrigerator, or maybe playing flash tag with your friends. But if you lived in a working class neighborhood or a poor neighborhood, you saw all hell break loose. Stores you'd known all your life were looted to the studs by all kinds of people, young and old, criminal and formerly law-abiding. New cars were driven straight through the showroom windows and off into the streets. So many fires were set in that 24-hour period that the fire department stopped responding, and in the end, all that the city had left was accusations and finger pointing and a soul searching for what was happening to us, what were we becoming. And so I learned as an adult about the backdrop of race and class and urban decay that I didn't really understand at 13, but that had somehow shaped my life anyway. For me, the very hardest decision in research was as to whether I should reach out to the parents of the victims of the Son of Sam killings. I chose not to in the end. Instead, I researched newspaper accounts and kept my mentions of the young victims to a minimum. I tried my best to treat the violence as a matter of historical record and not as a way to sensationalize the book or to use the death of these beautiful young people as entertainment. My reasoning is that these families suffered an enormous loss once. Even today, they miss these young people that never got the chance to grow up, and I didn't want to add to their pain. So it somehow became a book about a family struggling at the same time when the city all around them was struggling. It's been so gratifying to me to see this book well received. I love it when I meet young people who say, "Your book was really scary. I couldn't read it by myself," because it tells me that I did a good job at recreating the dread that we all felt, as though something was right over our shoulder. It's felt good to me to hear from New Yorkers who lived through that time, including a librarian from Larchmont, New York, who told me she remembers the day exactly that Son of Sam was arrested in her neighborhood in Yonkers, where she lived. She recognized him right away as one of her neighbors. I even feel gratified when I hear people say that disco music is now lodged hopelessly in their brain for days. You know, Roger Sutton at the Hornbook humming "Burn, Baby, Burn." It's just too good for words. So, in an unexpected twist of fate, something I couldn't have imagined happened, and that's that the 1970s is suddenly so much in the media now. Does anybody here watch The Get Down on Netflix? That has taken over, and there were episodes of Vinyl. Polyester is back, people, whether you want it or not. So I could ask myself, why the 70s? Why this look back? But then I think, as I often do, of my mother, and I already know why. Todo se repite. Everything repeats itself, she told me. And so I look at teens today in 2016 who live with a fear of unexpected violence, these school shooter drills, the bomb-sniffing dogs in our metro, the worry of whether someone will open fire at a mall, at a movie theater. I look at the racial struggles of young African Americans with police, especially this summer, this week that has just passed. I look at it all, and it feels so familiar in the sadness and in the rage and in the senselessness. 40 years have passed, 1976, 77 to 2016, 2017. It took me 40 years to write this book and to make sense of the violence of my early life. So I want to end here by asking the teens and the early adults here to pay attention to what is around you, to what you are living now. In 40 years, what's going to be the soundtrack of this time and of your life? What are the social issues and the struggles that shape you every day? What are the haircuts, the styles? What are the random moments of your daily life that are going to follow you forever until you have to knit them into a story of your own? Your story will be the story of 2016, but you know, it will also be the story of young people in all times, because todo se repite. So what is it that you'll need to say, that you'll burn to say about being young and new in this world gone crazy? Thank you. So I think, where's my timekeeper? Oh, it's perfect timing. I never get to do that. I did it right this time. I didn't overtalk, which is a big problem for me. I would love to answer your questions. I can even demonstrate disco moves if I'm pressed. So, come forward. I think there's 2 microphones, and don't leave me hanging, people. Yes.
So why do you think despair makes for such an interesting book topic?
Despair, because when I think of being a teenager, sadly, the feeling that I associate with what it was like to be young was despair. Like, it was fun. It involved friends. It involved joyous things that, parents always tell you should be grateful for. For example, I'm sure you've heard your parents say, "What are you complaining about? This is the best time of your life," et cetera, et cetera. And all the young people are like, "Have you lost your mind?" Because it's painful. Because there's no way to unfold as a person without killing off some parts, distancing ourselves from people we love, duking it out, loathing ourselves. And so I think that is a connection. And I think most of the teens in here, those days when you wake up and you're just mad. You're just mad inside, the world feels angry, and that's what I wanted to capture. Thank you for that question. Anybody else? Come on. All right, am I really gonna have to do the hustle? Okay, here comes Mary. Hey.
But I'm going to put you on the spot and ask for the dance moves. No,
Okay.
I'm kidding.
My former friend, Mary. Yes, yes.
I was curious about what you're working on now. And also, you are such a strong voice for girls and for women. We're just living in rape culture at this point in time. And I'm wondering if your next works are going to explore some of that.
Yes. So yes, I am a passionate advocate of girls and literature for strong girls, and do a lot of work around that. Not only in making sure that my books feature strong girls and women, but my work in the community has the Girls of Summer reading list and so on. So the next book that I'm working on, I have 2 that will come out of Candlewick. One is a young adult novel that features a brother and a sister who end up going to the same high school for the first time in their lives. One is a typical peer, one is a young person who has intellectual disabilities, and how they have to figure out how to share that space together. That's not the one I'm working on now, because that one feels so hard and there's so many tangled memories that I still have to let that float in the ether for a while. So what I'm doing right now is working with a middle grade novel about a girl named Mercy Suarez. She lives in South Florida with her entire extended Badinsky Cuban family. You can imagine the problem. So that's what I'm working on. Hi there.
What do you do when you have writer's block?
Oh, that. You know what I really try to do? I try to get up and move. I take a walk, I garden, I do something physical to sort of get out of my brain for a little while. I love to read passionately. I read every single day for long periods of time. And sometimes I just can't, melting into somebody else's story gives me ideas for my own. And then sometimes I just stop for a while and walk away and work on something else and come back to it when I feel a little less tired. What do you do when you have writer's block? Yeah, you see, I know. We all say that same thing. Well, try this. Hey, how you doing?
Good. Who is your favorite writer?
Oh, my favorite writer. You know, the person whose book I'm reading at the moment. It changes almost every day. But I will tell you, Kwame Alexander is a dear friend of mine, and I really do love his books. I love Jason Reynolds' books. I mean, there's just so many different writers. And I also like different kinds of books. Like, some people really just like one type of book, but I like realistic fiction, but I like also science fiction. I like, all kinds of things, graphic novels. What's your favorite kind of book?
I don't know.
Yeah. So, I just like everybody, I guess. Yes, on this side.
Hi. I just want to say thank you for for making a space for Hispanic writers and for being such a strong Hispanic role model for people who want to write. And there's not that many Hispanic writers right now, so I guess just thank you.
Oh my gosh, that makes me feel wonderful. And thank you. And I want to tell you, I want you to follow Latinos in Kidlit, because it's a wonderful blog of all of the new Latino writers coming up. And there's just so many exciting voices producing work, and maybe yours will be added in there as well. I think there's been no better time to be a Latino writer than now, because we do know each other, we are making community, and we're also sort of working as literary activists. There's no other option, right? When we have so few books that are published by people of color, right? So we write our work and we send it out into the world, but then we're in schools, we're working with young people, we're working with new writers, and we're trying to be literary citizens, really, ciudadanos.
I also like how you're being Hispanic and you're creating Hispanic characters, and it's not normal. Like, if we don't make the space, no one's gonna do it for us.
Right.
So you're really taking a stance there, and
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope that the representations I make feel real and authentic, because that matters. Beyond the piñata matters. Can I take one here and there? Yes.
So I have a book that I'm writing, and a character in it emerged that is a young Hispanic girl. And I'm just wondering, what should I be careful of as a non-Hispanic writing this character?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to, just do the piñatas.
Yes. Well, I have 2 minutes, so that's a scary question. So here's what I'd say. It's very easy to get it wrong. And the way that people typically get it wrong is not in the big things, it's in the small details of people's lives. Always write a person who is of a culture, not the other way around, a culture who is a person in your book. So you need to be careful of that. If you hang out afterward, you and I can talk. There is someone who just did a pretty good blog post on some things, but if I were you, the best advice I could give you is to write the person, to vet the book with people of that culture, and to listen to their advice when they say, you got this wrong, or maybe consider that. It'll just spare you, I think, some pain. Yes.
I'm the mother of a budding young writer, and I don't know if you were physically writing as a teenager, but if you were, did you have some kind of, daily practice or writing suggestions?
I was writing always, but I didn't have a daily practice. I don't keep a journal, right? Only in emergencies. I keep a journal for certain really key moments, but I don't. I think the practice that I have that has been with me since I was in the 3rd grade is that I read voraciously. I'm never not reading. And it gives you avenues into other ideas into other people's lives, into vocabulary. It's a comfort, it's an escape, it's all the things you guys know about books. I cannot imagine my life without story and books. So if I had somebody who is a budding writer, I would give them a whole room in your house, ma'am, that is filled with books. You're welcome.
Did you know you wanted to be a writer? Did you know you wanted to be a writer?
Yes, I did, but it took me a long time to admit it. And the sign now says, wrap up, please. So I want to thank you so much for coming out. I want you to go disco dancing in the near future. And thanks for coming out and enjoy the rest of the festival. Cariño.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.